Panels worked perfectly. Chuck, this worked absolutely perfectly. So we'll see. I like this going forward. We're here at our 8 o'clock time slot. Well, that didn't work. Interesting. All right. GM's tricks of the trade. Which are we on? I can't remember which. 37? It is 39. GM's tricks of the trade number 39. That's pretty good. But now we didn't start doing the videos until somewhere down the line. But yeah, very interesting. Good stuff. All right, I'm refreshing the web page. See what's going on. All right, so we're at GM's Tricks of the Trade number 39. We did a little bit of a little different this time. Things have been kind of chaotic in the troll den, so I backed up and just kind of it is something I wanted to do it for a while actually. Is just list some of these books that I've read that kind of influenced my game mastering and all of that business. And it seemed like an opportune time since the troll dens were turned upside down 6 ways of Sunday. It's been an entertaining week. How's it going, Bake Sauce? How's it going, M5? Tim Decker 58. As always, when we're with any of these GM Tricks of the Trade, first off, thank you everybody for coming by, and also if you have any comments or questions or observations on what I'm talking about, feel free to throw it into the feed there and join in on the discussion. We all have a host of experiences and a host of things that we do, of course. So all the stuff that we bring to the table, and it's always a good thing to share with whatever you got. You're a bit quiet. Can you not hear me, Chuck? So you can, okay, all right. If Keith Jr. can hear me, we're good to go. Everything's good. Oh, am I too far from the microphone? I think that you guys keep talking about getting fancy equipment, but I got this thing. What is it, a snowball or something? All right, good deal. Willie the Rat. All right. So we're going to give it a few minutes, let people wander in before we dive into these books that I have picked. Some of you may have already read the newsletter. Of course, if you haven't, subscribe to the newsletter. We come out, I think it's every Wednesday. We release GM Tricks of the Trade, and of course the newsletter also is all things trolls, things we're doing, things we're selling, blah, 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 blah. New releases, etc. And I'm told that I need to ask everyone please to follow us. If you haven't followed us on Twitch, please follow us here. Click the follow button and show us your support, if you would. And we'll keep rolling these things out. Oh, that's right, you went to Mexico. Where about in Mexico did you go? I've actually never been to Mexico. Davis has. He wandered around Mexico and Belize. I think he really, really liked Belize. His latest passion is Thailand, so he's been bebopping to Thailand as much as he can. I have grown more rooted in my in my gaming age. Reku Valerta with the rest of the Canadians. There you go. All right. We'll give it about 2 more minutes, and then we'll dive into these books that I have been perusing. So these books that are on the list, I don't know if any of you saw the pictures there, but I've got a pretty decent collection of books. Most of those, when I started really reading, the first book I ever read, if I remember correctly, was Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar. So that's the fifth in the Tarzan series, and I bought it at Four Seasons, or I think it was Four Seasons. No, what was the? Can't remember the name of the little shops. There was little Coke, candy, and book magazine shops there on Post. I grew up on Army Post, so we bought it there, and that kind of plunged me into the world of fiction, science fiction mostly. I shouldn't say that. The very first book I read was The Early Bird Gets the Worm. I do remember that. I actually have that book from, good God, it must be 1970 or 71 or something. Stuck in a trunk somewhere. It's all got crayon markers all over it. It's all torn up. But yeah. So the first fantasy fiction book I read. Now, see, that would have been Call of the Wild. I remember reading that one too. I love that book. First fantasy that I read would have been Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar, and that kind of launched me into this whole genre of fantasy fiction. And I know that's a little bit off the traditional fantasy like Tolkien and whatnot, but probably for the first, I don't know, through the mid 80s, deep into the 80s, I read predominantly fantasy and a little bit of science fiction. Lots and lots of fantasy books. I would take a good chunk. I worked at a variety of jobs, and I'd take a good chunk of my money down to Walden Books, buy 3 or 4 books every week, and then that's what I would be reading all week. So I read a lot. I shifted in the Army. I had a little bit of time on my hands. I was in the Army for about 3 years. Had a little bit of time on my hands, so I shifted into history, and most of what you see in those pictures, if you got a chance to look at them, is history. The vast majority of it is history books. And these books actually, as much as the early fantasy books, began to shape the way I ran games. No matter what because I played Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced D&D, and then later C&C, of course. This stuff seeped into my game mastering and the table constantly. I mean, just everything I read would somehow spill over into it. And some of these books they resonated so much with me that it kind of rewired the way I thought and the way I perceived things and the way I ran games, especially books like The Worm or Ouroboros. It really just kind of retooled my thinking on things, which is really kind of a cool thing. And that's one reason that I decided to do this 5. I ended up with 6. I think there are so many books that impacted the way I game, and I'm sure they have impacted the way you guys game, that it was difficult to kind of par them down and choose which one. So I really kind of, when I was doing it, I stepped back. And then just tried to think about those that left a mark, even if I couldn't remember a lot of the content in the book, just those that leaped out of me with kind of a game context in mind. And that's what I built the list off of, and we're going to dive into that about now. We are about to start, just waiting on Steve's oration on his massive book collection that spans 2 states. It's a lot of books. I'm not sure how many I've got. I think it's well beyond 4,000 books, and most of them are hardcover. I got rid of some about a year ago. I had the boxes. We all got them in college. The Penguin Press books, the classics, the Mayor of Casterbridge by Tom Hardy, and Nana's book by Voltaire. Voltaire wrote Nana. Whoever, and all of those kind of philosophy books. Those got boxed up, and I sold those, keeping all the hardcovers and the histories and whatnot. So it's a lot of books. I've moved that collection about 3 times now, and I'm not inclined to do that. I'm not inclined to do that again. And I know Tim has been very vocal in his letting me know he's going to be out of the state when I finally do move again and have to pick and box those books up. It's my greatest fear in the apocalypse. If the apocalypse happens, how am I going to get all of those books out of this house and to a safe place and keep them from suffering a library at Alexandria flames? At any rate, so that all aside, let's dive into these first books. So the first one that I picked out was one probably, yes it can, absolutely, laugh, and that's, my wife moved all of her stuff to the Kindle. She just does Kindle now, so her book collection, which is relatively large, is very light. she can just walk around the room and she's got the whole thing. The whole thing. I need a bag of holding it, you know. But yeah, I don't know why, but I take great comfort in those books. They actually, that's our game room, so the books are all the way around the gaming tables and all of that stuff. So that's where we plop down game. I don't know why it is, but I still feel comfortable there. But so the first book that I picked off the shelf was William Marshall. Now I think, if I remember correctly, this book is frequently assigned in colleges for people taking World Civ or maybe some of the medieval classes and whatnot. It's a relatively common book, and I think probably quite a few people have read it. But it essentially tracks the journey. If I remember correctly, it's the biography of William Marshall, who was a knight in the 1100s and into the 1200s, and we know about William Marshall largely because of this one poem that they discovered years ago, and it kind of relates his life and death and what he left afterwards and whatnot. But when you get into the historiography of William, he's a fascinating character. His father was a very minor noble in England under King Stephen, and when King Stephen, during some kind of civil strife, William was given by his father to King Stephen as surety. And at one point, when William's father kind of broke the pact, King Stephen said, "I'm going to execute your son by putting him in a catapult and throwing him against the wall." The boy's about 6. William's about 6 when this is happening. And his father says, "Go ahead and do it. My loins are still strong. I can make more sons," or something to that effect. So that begins William on his journey through life, and it's truly an amazing journey. King Stephen actually takes him in, and then ends up farming him out, as people did in those days. I think William was the 4th son or the 3rd son. These sons got farmed out and were just basically became knights, serving some minor lords somewhere to learn the trade. But William learns the trade and then some. He goes on to become one of the most famous tournament knights in Christendom. Even beyond that, when King Stephen dies and Henry II of Anjou becomes king of England, William joins his household. He ends up becoming part of Henry III. Now, Henry III is Prince Henry. He dies, never actually becomes Henry III, but he becomes part of Henry II's son Henry's household, and is just a major knight in that household. The two Henrys fight a number of times. William Marshall has to choose sides. So Henry dies, and then Henry II, William continues to serve Henry II. Henry dies, he serves Richard. Richard dies, he serves John. And at some point right around, I think during John's reign, he died, a very old man. But he died extraordinarily wealthy with titles and children and land. And when you read this book, you can trace the history of this man from being threatened to be put into a catapult and hurled against the walls of a castle, to being one of the most powerful and respected knights in all Christendom. And not to give a lot of the history away, there's fascinating stuff that happens in this history, but all of Henry II's, and we'll talk about more of this later, all of Henry II's sons kind of warred against him quite a bit. And when Richard turned against Henry was very old. Henry II was very old and very sick. Richard turned against him. Most of the knights of Normandy turned against him, the barons and whatnot. So Henry was actually on his deathbed. But William Marshall, true to his honor, would not quit serving Henry II, even though the rest of Henry's kingdom basically had switched their allegiances to Richard the Lionheart, who was obviously going to be the next king. So, but William stands his ground when there's almost nobody left in Henry's army, and he actually faces off against Richard at one point, and Richard quits the field and won't fight him because he's William Marshall. So, reading this book, what it really what it really did for me as a game master, and what the reason it made this list, it really kind of opens up that whole world of knightly tournaments. Beyond the history of William himself, his real passion, his real skill, his real abilities was on the battlefield. The reason that he was given charge of young Henry's household is because of his skills in combat and his ability to train young Henry, and his knight. He was really unstoppable. He made his wealth on the battlefield, and it gave me, as a game master, this whole new kind of look at the way knights interacted. We get a lot of stuff from movies and popular culture and all that stuff, but this book, William Marshall, this is the real deal. This is the guy who kind of set the standard for the way this would be done for the next 150 years. To keep things in kind of perspective, in his day, so he's born in like 1145 or something like that, and we don't really have a clear date on it. In his day, a commoner, a poor person, perhaps not a commoner, but you could actually work your way up to becoming a knight through feat of arms. Now that changes in the 14th century. They start putting in rules. I think that when the Tree of Battles comes out, I think that's a book by that priest. Anyway, by the 14th century, the 1300s, the game changes. There's so many knights now that they begin restricting who can be it. But in William's day, that's not the case. And you could actually make your way through blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what William Marshall does. And reading his story actually it bled all of that into my game, because suddenly I realized, okay, it's a hierarchical system, but it's not what we're envisioning. This is where a man can, just fight his way, or woman, well, in those days, not really a woman, but in the game context, can fight their way forward and achieve whatever it is that they're wanting to achieve. So, and Dungeons and Dragons, Castles and Crusades, Swords and Wizardry, all of these games are built for that. Of course, that's what you're doing, right? That's what the characters, at the end of the day, they start at first level. They have nothing. They're just poor, useless vagabonds drifting along, but they're going on an adventure to gain wealth and power and land and whatever it is that they're after. Well, that actually is the story of William Marshall. So I would strongly recommend that book. Pick it up, read it, digest it, learn what the real deal was like before it becomes so static in the duels and later, of course, with the musketeers and all that stuff. This, in William Marshall's day, and it really is that period between about 800 and 1200 is one of my favorite periods in history. It's really the Wild West of the Middle Ages. It's your abilities put you forward. So that's the first book on the list. And these aren't rated by any. And they're not rated by what is my favorite or what is my least favorite or whatever. These are the books, and this is the way we just arranged them. And again, ask any questions, give us any shout. And thank you, Dead Hand, for the Tier 1 subscription. Very much appreciated. And again, if you haven't followed us, please follow us here on Twitch, 𝐓𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐤𝐬, or whatever it is we are. All right, so we're going to go from. So you're going to find out that a lot on this list actually happens in and around the 12th century, the 1100s, because it's such a vibrant time during medieval history. But we're going to shift for the next book. We're going to shift to the other side of the planet and go forward a little bit in time, and we're going to land on the plains, the North American plains. Ultra Magnus. That's actually, thank you. That's good to hear, because that means that's sort of how that's bled through. That the way that book, when you're reading about the tournaments, because it's nothing really, and these contests are not. I mean, these guys are honorable and they treat each other with respect, but people get killed, and there's rules, and it's dangerous and it's brutal. You can be outfitted in however much money that armor and equipment and horses cost. You lose the tournament, you just lost your armor. frequently. So you could end up poverty-stricken on these things. It was serious business. Very, very amazing. I mean, it just gave me, and it would certainly give you a different view, I think, of the way the early nightly classics kind of came together. All right, so next we have Stanley Vestal's Warpath. Of these 6 books we're talking about today, this is probably my favorite. Now, I'm an absolutely huge, I have this gigantic interest in Native American history. I read as much history as I can find, and finding good histories on Native Americans is challenging because there's so much stuff that's kind of balled in, just from every angle. There's all kinds of stuff. But Stanley Vestal he wasn't really a historian. He was kind of we're going to call him a historian for lack of anything else. A cultural anthropologist is probably what he was. But at the turn of the last century, he did a great deal of research on a number of the Plains tribes. He knew a lot of people, a lot of the Native Americans, the chiefs, the warriors, all of these people, and he spent a lot of time recording conversations, interviewing, and whatnot. And there's quite a few books out there by Stanley Vestal. I recommend almost any of them. Probably a little bit of his history is dated, but it's still extraordinarily informative because he's literally talking to the people who fought on the plains, right? This is oh yeah, Chuck, it's absolutely, especially the plains tribes are just absolutely astoundingly an amazing time in history. So very, very vibrant and filled with so much warfare and migrations and movement. And this is even before, European settlers began sprawling all over the place. Extraordinarily vibrant time in history. And when you're reading Native American history, when you get into the actual history and you get beyond the emotional side of things, we get caught up into a lot when we're discussing Native Americans. These people were amazing. They were their accomplishments on the battlefield and off the battlefield were astounding. And Stanley Vestal's capture of White Bull here is probably the best I've read. So basically what you have, Stanley talks to, I say Stanley, I don't really know Stanley, so it's probably Mr. Vestal. Should be appropriate. But anyway, so Stanley Vestal here talks to White Bull. Now, White Bull is a nephew. I'm always getting cousin and nephew swapped around. It's my Arkansan in me. White Bull is a nephew of Sitting Bull. And Sitting Bull, of course, is one of the major Lakota medicine men, chieftain that guided the whole Lakota nation for, good Lord, 30, 40 years, for a very long time, until his death in 1883 or 86 or whatever it was. So White Bull is his nephew, so he's a little bit younger than Sitting Bull by 20 years or so. But this guy's story is astounding, and he relates it to Stanley Vestal. This is in the early turn of the century, so this is after the wars are all over. White Bull has been on the reservation for a while. Pine Ridge, I think. He's a Minneconjou, so I can't remember where the reservation was, but I think it's Pine Ridge, but it may not be. At any rate, so in this book, Warpath, White Bull really talks about his warrior side. There's a little bit of Native American and Lakota culture kind of seeps through just because you're reading the story of this young man's life. And he really only focuses on about 15 years of his life, gaining his manhood, becoming a warrior, and the fights that he fought. And this guy, he talks about all of this stuff so matter-of-factly, and there's almost no, a little bit of anger later, but it's in a very tiny portion of the book, but it's really not even anger at the way things turned out for him, it was the way he was treated. But in the vast majority of this book, I guess I could hold that up too, in the vast majority of this book, Warpath, this is about his battles and his fights and his hunts and the things he did when he was a warrior. He didn't want to dwell on the rest of it. and it's clear by the time you're finished with this book. It's very, very clear. It was very clear to me that this was the definition of White Bull's life. This is the way he saw himself, and no matter what came after, that was irrelevant. His 15 years or so as a warrior on the warpath, every year, that's what defined who he was, both for himself and in his nation as well. And this guy fought. This guy fought constantly. So there's the Red Cloud War, that is one of the few wars where Native Americans actually defeated the United States and gained favorable terms in their treaties in the settlements beyond. Now, it didn't last, but Red Cloud deserves the tip of the hat for that. But so he fights. So White Bull fights. I want to get these battles right. It's been a while. 100 white men killed in the wagon box fight. Those are both in the Red Cloud War. Now, these were big fights for the Lakota. Huge fights. They actually annihilated a troop of U.S. troopers came out of Fort Kearny. I'm going to miss my years up on this. It's going to be about 1869 or 70 or something like that. It may be even before that. But at any rate, they attacked this troop of about, I think, 89 or 102 or whatever it was, soldiers, and annihilated them to the man. I mean, and it's this brutal fight up and down this valley. And White Bull earns crazy honors in this battle. The wagon box fight is a little bit later. It's not quite as brutal, but it's a long, drawn-out fight. Fast forward beyond the middle battles, but he also fights in the Great Sioux War, which places him at the Rosebud, where and it's another one of these battles that we talk about Little Bighorn all the time, but the Lakota defeated General Crooks. There was 3 columns coming in to destroy the Lakota Nation, and now there's Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and I think some Dakota in there. And just to be clear, when I'm saying Lakota, that's a branch of what is commonly called the Sioux tribe. I think it's the Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota. That's the Sioux tribe, and that the name Sioux I think is used commonly, but I'm not 100% certain it's what they designate themselves. At any rate, so there's 3 columns coming in to the Little Bighorn, where the Indians are kind of just gathering. Well, at Rosebud, Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, White Bull, all of these Indians defeat General Crook's wing of that 3-pronged attack and drive it off and into the plains, leaving Custer. Actually, it's one of the reasons Custer got annihilated because General Crook wasn't there. But so then he goes on and fights, of course, the Little Bighorn. And when you're reading the Battle of the Little Bighorn, it's really cool because he's kind of challenging Crazy Horse to these daring moments. And there's one moment where he just rides through. So you may not know a lot of it, but Custer ends up on this hillock, and the Indians are just all around him. The Native Americans are all around him. And White Bull challenges Crazy Horse to go through and count coup. Crazy Horse doesn't want to do it at first, but White Bull does and goes through it. So now Crazy Horse does it as well to show his medicine through the great White Bull. And so there's these crazy acts of bravery in these battles that White Bull's talking about. And then even beyond that, those are the ones he fought to defend his people. Beyond that is this amazing sense of just adventure. These guys, you're reading one section, and the way it's kind of pictured, the way I pictured it in my head, there's a whole bunch of these Native Americans sitting around a campfire. One of the famous warrior chiefs come up to them, I'm going to attack the Crow tomorrow, who's in? Some go, some don't, and no one's shamed if you don't go. Who cares? Some of them end up going, some of them don't, and they do this major raid against the Crow Indians. And White Bull went on to fight. I mean, he not went on to, but during the intermission of fighting at these huge battles with the United States, he fought the Assiniboine, he fought the Crow, he fought just about every tribe that was around the Lakota in there. And when you're reading this insane matter of fact, I'm going to get up, we're going to ride from, of course they didn't have the state designation, but I'm going to ride from southern South Dakota to northern Montana and steal some horses from the Crow and count some coup and then come home. At one point I'm reading it and I'm thinking, good Lord, this is literally like a D&D adventure. This is literally like these guys are going on an adventure to get wealth and fame and then come back to their people and enjoy the accolades of all that. And when you're reading it, it's very akin to the William Marshall book. This is what White Bull is doing. This is his job. This is his career. And there's no shame in any of it. There's no apologies. There's no, I don't know, it's very, it's an amazing book. I strongly recommend it. Stanley Vestal's writing is extremely easy to read, and it's so, at certain points of the book, I felt like I was actually reading something White Bull himself wrote. And obviously, Vestal is transcribing this material from interviews that he did with White Bull. He really got, I thought he really captured the chieftain's power, just all of it. But really the book, not only is the book an astounding study of Native American warrior culture, but it's also an amazing study of just a man who, just like William Marshall, he carved a living off of the battlefield out of life, and it did him well. It served him very well until the day that he crossed over. So strongly recommend the book. It's very much, it'll make you think of any character's adventures that they're tracing about all over the place. So definitely pick up Warpath. Like I said, it's an extremely easy read, fantastic, and it's going to be, and I'll warn you, it's going to be different. If you read Native American history, it's going to be different than what a lot of stuff is out there, because this is just White Bull telling the story of his life, and it's a life absolutely filled with adventure. So definitely check that out. It resonates in the RPG community because his life is much like William Marshall's, much like just an adventure. I think I missed a comment up in there. Tim Decker said, "I love this time period for a couple of reasons. There's the people migrating westward with hope of a new, better life, or to run from their past. To that, they clash and settle with the Native Americans, and then trying to defend their way of life. Such a rich opportunity for stereotype." It really is. I've said many times that if you read history, there's as much going on in the history of our species, as many crazy and bizarre stories as there are in fiction, minus the rings and Mount Doom, what have you. But it is the tapestry that's our whole species' story. It's astounding, and it's filled with absolutely astounding things. And that the clash of these two civilizations, and that's essentially what it is. I know we like to frame it a little bit differently, but the Native Americans had a civilization of their own, and the European colonialists had a civilization of their own. And you can see when you start reading the stuff, these two civilizations just clashed. Sometimes it meshed. Sometimes one civilization borrowed from another. Sometimes the other borrowed from the one. And and in the end, it was lots of battle, lots of pain, lots of sorrow, lots of love, lots of all kinds of things. It just wove this whole tapestry together. And the nice thing, this has happened, of course, countless times in history, absolutely countless times. Every time one group of knuckleheads moves from point A to point B, whoever's at point B is going to have to contend with it. And it goes from Attila the Hun to Celts and to Britons and Romans. It's just all over the place. So, but here we actually get to see it, right? We get to in Stanley Vestal's book and other books like this, we get to hear the participants speak about their experiences. And the amazing thing about Warpath is that it's just one warrior's experience, and it's very much the path of a warrior. So definitely check that out. Excellent book. All right, so let's jump on into number 3, unless anyone has any observations and whatnot. Okay, so number 3, what happened here? Okay, so I don't actually have Ouroboros with me. Use the horses later. I don't think, as the ends we think on basic level like this with adventures, we could glean a lot from this. Ultra Magnus, that's absolutely it. And that's what's amazing about that book, Warpath, because that's literally what they do. They just think, I'm going to just go over here, get this, and come home. That's what I'm going to do. And it couldn't have been easy. I mean, I don't know how long it would take you to ride a horse from South Dakota to northern Montana, but it can't be quick. I mean, a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks. I mean, I don't know. William Marshall and Lord Chamberlain of England, there was a long-standing tradition. Then when the monarch dies, the Chamberlain breaks the white staff from office and puts it in the grave and symbolizes the end of his service to that monarch. Yeah, William Marshall definitely. I don't remember reading that, but he definitely was. I don't know, because he wasn't really. Eleanor becomes really the mouthpiece of that, of those two generations. We'll get to her in a minute, but William Marshall was absolutely astounding. So the Worm Orbis. I'm just going to kind of gloss over relatively quickly. This book I read a long time ago, and it's early fantasy fiction. It was written in the 1920s, 26 or 23. I don't know if I wrote that down in the sometime in the 1920s. And it's when really fantasy fiction was just beginning. Howard's just beginning to write. Lovecraft's just beginning to write. This is really beginning a new genre of literature that has just a few, antecedents in its past. So I don't think I said that word right. Tim will correct me later. But so at any rate, so the Worm Orbis is this huge, very involved, the world is Venus that you're on, fantasy world. And when I read it, it kind of broke all the stereotypes in my head. Because he wrote this before the stereotypes were made, before Tolkien or Howard or whoever it is created these stereotypes in fantasy these tropes, I guess, that we all kind of lean on, whether we're reading fantasy, writing fantasy, playing games, or running games, doesn't matter. We all kind of use the same tropes, the dragon and the treasure and blah, blah, blah. Well, Eric Edison's book is very different. He doesn't have any of these. So if I remember correctly, the goblins are actually the good guys. It's very different, and it made me, when I read The Worm Orbis, it made me think out of the box. I really began thinking, oh, wait a minute, okay, this is so different, it doesn't even feel comfortable. I've continued reading, enjoyed the book. It was a fine book, but its real gift to me was to get me thinking differently about these different species and different monsters and different whatever. And it's why you see things like in the world of Aird, if you're reading it, one of the major reasons that the hobgoblins in the kingdom of Bernadette have become so wealthy is they've discovered that they can corner the milk trade with the city-states and the Han cities. And it sounds crazy and it sounds foolish and funny and goofy, but that's thinking, it's just me trying to think of something a little bit different, the way a world would evolve with these creatures that actually exist. If there's a kingdom of orcs and a kingdom of hobgoblins and a kingdom of humans, how would they actually all interact? They're not the same species by any stretch of the imagination, not any more than a dog and a horse would be. So their cultures would be different, the clashing would be different, and everything, the interactions would be different. So the Worm Orbis kind of set me on that path to thinking a little bit differently. So definitely check that out. It's an older book. It's hard to get it. It's hard to find. A couple of emails were sent to me. It's definitely in the Gutenberg websites, and you can snatch a copy of it and read it. But if you can get a I can't find my copy. It's wandered off. But if you can get a copy of it, and definitely try out the Worm Orbis. It is a little bit slow, and it's very, very different than what you're used to. I can guarantee it. All right, so let's dive into number 4. So these two books. Think beyond the common tropes of today by reaching back to source material from 1920. I can see that it performs Aird to a very unique taste. Thank you, Twitchy DM. It really, I don't know. It's so there's so much more out there than what we have. I remember back in than what we're used to. I remember back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, must have been the early 90s. I stumbled upon some science fiction books at a flea market. I hadn't read much science fiction, but I had to read, so I bought 90 cents, whatever. I bought this book, and it was so different than it was. Not Saberhagen, I think I wrote mine. I can't remember. I don't know who it was. But there's a series of these books, and it's just this guy adventuring in space, and it was really cool. And you're right. There's so much stuff that precedes what we're used to now that it shouldn't be forgotten. And the Worm Orbis definitely falls into that. There's another one. I think this is a Lovecraft book. I can't remember. The Dream Quest of the Unknown 𝐓𝐫𝐤𝐬. I think that's Lovecraft, and that was a huge out of the box book as well. But thank you for that. Thank you, Twitchy Dan. Much appreciated. The next one is, we're not going to talk a lot about Mark Bloch's Feudal Society. That's this, I have it in a 2-volume set. The first volume is The Growth and Ties of Dependence, and the second one is Social Classes and Political Organization. So I put this one in here because it definitely shaped the way I developed AIRD and definitely shaped the way we run a lot of our games. Block really breaks down the extraordinarily, insanely complicated system of cultural interaction, governance, and economy that is feudalism and manorialism. You can't separate those two institutions, and you can't really just say, if you you get into the feudal world, you really can't just say it's a system of government. It's really, as his book says here, it is a society. It's the apparatus that the whole culture was built around, the whole exchange of services and goods and time and all of that stuff. What are we doing now? So at any rate, I got some Skypes coming in. So at any rate, oh wait, hold on. I'll do it after 4. Okay, we're going to do something, a giveaway here very soon. I was told what it was and I completely forgot. Let me see. I don't know what it is. Chuck, put it up just a minute. Go ahead and put it up, Chuck, while I'm jibber-jabbering, because I'm way going over time on this one. At any rate, so Feudal Society, absolutely fantastic book. 2-volume set. However, I will caution you, it is very densely written. It is a bit ponderous. I've read it once, and I've gone back to it a number of times. I've always wanted to read it twice, but I remember how densely structured it is. It is a history of feudal society written by a French historian, and it is a bone-dry history. It's difficult to read at times, but it's filled with so much information. You will walk away from that book having a really good idea of the way feudalism is structured. Fantastic book, definitely. Let's see, ordered several recommended books. Thanks for this. Oh, good deal. Good, Luther. I hope you enjoy it. Very good books. What are we looking at? Willie the Rat says 107. It's $13.99. Talk as much as we may have to. We're running over very, very quickly, because the next book. So to dive into Feudal Society, definitely check that one out. The next book. So okay, I thought I had Henry next, but I don't. I've got Eleanor. Okay, so this one is really cool. So Eleanor of Aquitaine. If you don't know who she is, I don't know why, particularly in today's climate where we're kind of women are becoming, I don't know what the correct word is, but finding their place more defined in history. Eleanor should really be, if not at the top of that list, really to the top of that list. She inherited the Duchy of Aquitaine, which is the most powerful duchy in Western Europe. She married the King of France. I want to say it's Charles VII, but I'm going to get that messed up. She went on a crusade all the way to the Holy Land. She may or may not have had a love affair with one of the most famous knights in Christendom, Raymond of Toulouse. I'm not very good with my French. So then she divorces Charles in his madcap love affair with Henry II, marries Henry II, and she's the mother of younger Henry, who we talked about earlier. He passes away. She's the mother of Richard the Lionhearted, truly one of the greatest captains of the medieval era. She's the mother of John Lackland, who you know from the Robin Hood stories, King John, and she's the grandmother of Henry III, and she is a deciding voice and factor in the all of these kingdoms. She is a voice from Charles VII all the way through to Henry III when she passes away. An absolutely amazing woman. And if I remember correctly, she at her court in Aquitaine, I can't remember what her capital was. Is it Pourquoi? I think it's Pourquoi. In her court there, she actually gave birth to the whole troubadour. She's the one who invited troubadours to her court, and that whole kind of Arthurian legends, the romances, the songs and poets came out of her drive to make that happen. So not only is she a gigantic political influence, she is an absolutely monstrous cultural influence on Western Europe and on France and on England and medieval culture. So her footprint is gigantic. It's every bit as big as Henry II. and you should definitely read about it for the gaming context. What it will bring, it'll give you an understanding. Too often, the medieval period is cast as male-dominated, and it certainly was, but it cast as women were just, had no voice, and that's just not true. And you can carry this concept over and into your games by reading this. And Marion Mead's book is very well written. She is a novelist, however, so you're going to get a little bit of that bleeds into her history. She kind of makes up. I shouldn't say make up. That's completely unfair. She casts the stories in kind of a story-like fashion, less history. Very different than Block's, agonizing. But I shouldn't say agonizing. That is a very good book. So definitely check out 𝐓𝐫𝐚𝐝 of 𝐓𝐫𝐚𝐝. And I think I saw a pop-up in the kingdom here. So, yes, Willie, you're dead on. If you want all of these characters to be brought to life, watch A Lion in Winter. Do the older one. I haven't seen the later one. Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn. Astounding performances. But it's also got the guy who plays Arthur from 𝐓𝐫𝐚𝐝. He plays John. Anthony Hopkins plays Richard. There's a famous actor who plays Geoffrey, but I can't remember who it is. Geoffrey is the one son that we don't know about from Henry II and Eleanor. And it's because he died in a tournament. Clearly, William Marshall did not teach him well enough. But Katharine Hepburn's portrayal of Eleanor in A Lion in Winter is astounding. Of course, she's just astounding at anything that she does. An absolutely amazing actress. Do not miss. Definitely go check it out. And the nice thing about both Eleanor of Aquitaine, William Marshall, and he's only in the movie a little bit, and this next one we're going to talk about Henry II and feudalism, is you get a nice feel of all of that in the movie A Lion in Winter. You'll really learn the fabrics all kind of tied together because Henry II, he's actually the Count of Anjou and the Count of Maine, and he's the Duke of Normandy. He marries the Duchess of Aquitaine, so he becomes the Duke of Aquitaine. He's the King of England. Later becomes the King of Ireland. Tries to conquer Ireland. I can't remember exactly how far he got. But as the Duke of Normandy, the Count of Maine, the Count of Anjou, he's a vassal of the King of France. France at the time, of course, was very small and not very powerful. And Henry, in the first part of his career, is able to kind of walk circles around Charles VII. It's not Charles. It's Louis. It's Louis IX. Whoever it was. But when Philip Augustus becomes King of France, this guy is insanely intelligent and begins to walk circles around Henry, Richard, and John, taking most of those lands away by the time he died. So what you get in all of these stories is this astounding. It'll bring feudalism alive. What Ferdinand Bloch is talking, what Mark Bloch is talking about, comes alive both on the movie with A Lion in the Winter and in these books on Eleanor and William Marshall. And the next one, oh wait, no, I guess I didn't. Okay, so I guess that's 5. All right, so I'm just going to throw this one in. I cut this from the list. Henry II, that's not on the list, I thought. Am I on crack? I'm going to let the crack go. Okay, I did cut this. Oh, okay, this is part of the Ferdinand Bloch. This is what it was. So in discussing feudal societies, a quick shout out to W.L. Warren's History of Henry II. This is feudalism alive. So this is the technical manual for how it works. This is it working in action because Henry II's whole story is that how he interacted with his liege, the King of France, and how he was still the King of England as well, and how all of that mess kind of ties together. So definitely check that out. I guess that kind of got knocked off. So the last book I want to talk about, I was very slow to read this book. A friend of mine suggested it for like 3 years, and I finally just picked it up and started reading it. But it is Tim. It's the only novel on the list, I think. No, it's the second novel on the list. It's Tim Willock's The Religion. So, this book, congratulations, good deal. So, Hobbit 32, that's what The Religion is about. This book is an astounding novel that traces these three characters. One is an ex-janissary, and the other two are just kind of ruffians, and they own a tavern at the beginning of the book. This woman comes in, and she wants to go to Malta before the Turks arrive. The backstory is that the Ottoman Sultan is he's trying to destroy the Knights of Malta in Malta, and he's going to lay siege to their castles there, St. Elmo and some other castles. And she wants to get there before the siege begins, and this our main character, our hero here, takes her there with his two buddies. So they get caught up into this grand adventure in and around Malta, the siege of Malta by the Turks. Now, the book is a historical novel. I usually kind of shy away from historical novels. I don't read those very often. But this guy, Willix, does an astounding job in weaving his story into the actual siege of Malta. And this is probably one of the most brutal battles our species has ever participated in. And I read the book and then immediately went and bought about 4 or 5 books on the siege of Malta and devoured them all to find out how accurate his portrayal was. It is insanely brutal. It's insanely violent, and it's insanely heroic. The knights, there's like, I'll get my numbers messed up. There's like 150 knights and about 6,000 Maltese men-at-arms and mercenaries, and about 40 to 50,000 Turks. And the Turks lay siege to these knights in these 3 kind of interconnected castles, and a 4th castle is across the bay, St. Elmo. And at the battles of St. Elmo, it takes them like 30 days to wear this post down. It's insanity what is going on. And the Turks are just wave after wave after wave attacking, lobbing cannon shells into it, all kinds of mess. And it's primitive cannon. This is 1565, so cannons are big and ponderous things. The knights are holding it. At one point, I think this is part of a historical record. One of the Maltese knights is very old. He's blind. He has his comrades take him up to the top of the battlement to sit him in a chair, and he's just hacking and hewing at Turks coming up over the thing. They build the knights take hoops off of barrels, cover it in pitch, wrap them in cloth, cover it in more pitch, set them on fire, and roll them down. The ramparts are so battered down at this point that they're just kind of hills. They roll these hoops down, flaming hoops down, and into the Turks, catching the Turks on fire. The Turks do this just absolutely fighting in almost insurmountable fortifications, and they won't quit. Not until the King of Spain arrives with one of his vassals arrives with an army do the Turks finally say, okay, this is getting too expensive. But the book itself treats both sides, both Muslims and Christians, as just people. There's no jingoism. There's none of that gobbledygook in here. It's just a novel about two. Like we were talking about earlier, it's 2 civilizations clashing, and that's what he talks about. His focus is on the battle. And what it brought to the gaming table, for me, reinforced something I had already been doing, but really just reinforced it, was the insane, violence of these battles, the blood, the mayhem, the terror, the struggle, all of these things. It brought that really to light, and that's why I recommend The Religion. Definitely, it's a big book. It's slow at times, but he tells the story from beginning to end, and it is an astounding story. And the battle sequences throughout are going to enlighten you as to the way weapons work, the way men fought, the way all of this stuff kind of unfolded in the 15th and 16th century. Absolutely astounding book. Definitely check out The Religion by Tim Willix. He's written a couple other books I haven't had a chance to snatch, but definitely check that out. I think that's it for us. That's all 6 books. And so a couple of quick things. If you haven't followed us, please do so. And I'm going to give you a quick recap of the 6 in case you kind of wandered in. So the first is the William Marshall, History of One of the Greatest Knights in Christendom. The second was Warpath, a story of an astounding warrior in the Lakota Nation. Third was The Worm Orbit, a book that I can't find my copy of. I don't know what I did to it. Fourth is Ferdinand Bloch's Feudal Society. I strongly would recommend this, but if you're not into heavy history reading and whatnot, buy it. put on the back of your toilet, read it, read it occasionally as you need something to read, and digest it slowly over time. Then Eleanor and Henry, definitely read these guys' histories and scoop up the religion. Absolutely fantastic, fantastic book. Do not miss it. Yes, Blue Matter, it is. It is a great book. And thank you for that, Howard. Very much appreciated. History is something I'm super passionate about. So I can get fired up about this pretty easy. Let's see, question from Twitchy. Suggestion on aired map. All along the Sea of Arun, westernmost aired map, to be a verdant green land. Can you adjust the color of the aired map to reflect this? There's just too much yellow with the implication that it is a desert. Yeah, if you're talking about the world map, yes. That world map needs some work. When Peter did it, he drew the original with black and white, and I asked him to color it, and he went back in and put colors in kind of where I said this is a forest and whatnot. But it definitely needs work over that. You'll see that on World Anvil, and we'll get once I get a hold of Peter and we actually do that, you'll see all of that kind of come out and pop up on the World Anvil. What am I waving around? Missed the one before Eleanor. What was before Eleanor? Warpath? Hold on, I can get to you, Jennifer. So there's that. The Worm Orbis. Feudal Society. Yes, so Feudal Society is the one you're talking about. That's these two guys here by Mark Bloch. Feudal Society. Fantastic, the book. A bit dense. So definitely check that out. All right, well, that's it for me. It's game time. We're going to start our evening's game. One of these days we'll probably broadcast that here on the Twitch, but it's small, but it's dense, Jennifer, I'm telling you. It's good stuff, but it's... at any rate, thank you all for showing up and joining us here on Twitch. Very, very much appreciated. We will be back next Tuesday for AMA at 4 on Tuesday, and then Jim's Tricks of the Trade. We're going to visit the movies next week. So next week, 8 o'clock this time, and please join us then. Thank you, Twitchy, for showing up, and congratulations again, and thanks, everybody. Very much appreciated. I'm going to sign off, and I got 2 minutes to get to my game. So, good night, all.